everyone, and welcome to week 7, video 6 of Edible Estates. We took a bit of a break last week just because there hadn't been much change in the bed. So we'll see that this week there's been a lot of growth, and the foliage is big foliage, not a huge amount happening in the fruiting and vegetable side of things, but I've got a teeny tiny little cauliflower that's starting in here. I've got quite a few little strawberries that are starting on the bush there. My potato is massive. And the little strawberries are making their runners, and that's where they'll set down their roots. So there's been a lot of growth. In the last week I've been cutting off a few of the lower leaves of the brassicas, so my cabbage, my cauliflower and broccoli. When they get very big and leafy like this, they tend to block the airflow around the bed, which can lead to surface mold. And also it just tells the plant that they need to push that energy into making their vegetable or the cauliflower or the broccoli. So basically all I've done is I've just gone to the bottom of the leaves, and I've just taken off the big lower ones like that, just to give a bit of space. I don't want to take off too many because I don't want to leave the center of it vulnerable, but I do want to free up a bit of space. My cabbage here is massive, so I'm going to take off this lower one as well. And I'll leave that. It's starting to compact in the middle, so it's starting to make its cabbage head there. And this one over here has had a bit of slug damage, so I'm hoping that the head of that hasn't been damaged. But otherwise all is looking good. My companion flowers are coming through. They've been a bit shaded out by the potatoes and the brassicas, but they'll push through into the light. I might move my calendula because it's right underneath there and it's getting no sun. So I'll bring it out and I'll pot it on the side here. My leeks, one of them is getting bigger. The other two are very slow. I'm not sure, I've never grown leeks before, so yeah, still just watching them to see what they do. My curly kale is big, it's got a lot of leaves on that. I can take off the lower leaves as well, chop them and fry them, put them into stir fries, it's lovely. And my lettuce is a great producer of leaves too, so so everything is looking good in the bed. Don't be scared to cut off the lower leaves of the brassicas, because it will just free up a bit of light and a bit of airflow in the bed. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about crop rotation, which I've mentioned in previous videos. Basically, crop rotation is about growing different groups of crops in different areas of your plot and rotating them through a 4-year rotation. And the benefits of this are to prevent the buildup of crop-specific pests and diseases in the soil. So that's, for example, with your potatoes, that would be things like blight and potato scab. With brassicas, it would be things like clubroot. And if you're growing the groups of veg in the same place every year, over a couple of years, those pests and diseases will start to build up because they've got a steady food supply, and it'll affect your crop, and you'll actually stop getting much produce out of the plants. So by moving them around, those specific pests and diseases are starved for the 3 years that crop is moving around, and by the time it comes back, their population will have decreased. So there'll still be a few of them in the soil, but probably not enough to cause real damage. It also keeps, by rotating your crops, it also keeps a better balance of nutrients in the soil, because each group of crops will have a different nutrient need. So they'll be taking different things out of the soil, and some of them will be adding things back into the soil. So over the 4 years, the soil will have a chance to just stay balanced. And it also helps to control weeds. So things like your brassicas and your potatoes, you can see that they've got good foliage cover, So underneath the light is blocked and the weed growth will be stopped because they need light to be able to grow. So as they're rotating through those beds, the ones that they're in, the weed growth will be restricted. So yeah, it helps with the weed growth as well. So basically, we're going to look at a 4-year rotation. So we're going to look at 4 different groups. The first is the potato family, which is the nightshades. So in with the potatoes are your tomatoes, which seem like an unlikely combination, but they're both from the same family. The second one is the legume, which is your peas and your beans. They are called nitrogen fixers, and they take nitrogen out of the air and they fix it into the soil. So they're actually adding back into the soil. The potatoes are a hungry crop, so they're taking out of the soil. Then your brassicas, which are your cauliflower and cabbage, and also things like kale and swede, turnips. They're all brassicas, and they're another hungry crop. So they need a lot of nutrients from the soil when they're growing. And finally, it's your roots. So that's your carrots and your parsnips, your beetroots and alliums, which are onions and garlic. And they actually like quite a poor soil because they are, if you put them into a rich soil, it tends to feed their foliage, so they'll give you big leaves but not a lot of root, which is what you're going to be eating. And they also like to dig, to get the length of the carrot or the parsnip, you need them to go down looking for nutrients. So that's what's going to give them the length. If there's too much nutrients in the soil, they don't really need to go anywhere to find the food, so you won't get the growth of the root. When we're setting out our garden, and I'll talk just in general about a plot, and then I'll talk about in a bed like this. If you've got a sort of a smallish area that you're going to be growing in, you would plan then to divide it into 4, and you would put in your different groups for the first year. And then in the second year, you would put, I suppose you would lay it out so that you have your potatoes, and following the potatoes would be your nitrogen fixers or your legumes. So the potatoes are going to take the nutrients out of the soil, and then the following year you're going to plant beans and peas into that soil, and they will fix nitrogen into the soil, and they will, in that way they'll put nutrients back into it. And then in the third year you'll move your brassicas into the bed that the legumes have moved out of. You'll move your potatoes on, you'll move your legumes into the place where the potatoes were, and then you'll move your brassicas in where the legumes were, and they'll then have the soil that has the nutrients and the nitrogen in from the legumes. And your roots will always follow your brassicas, because brassicas deplete the soil, they take out a lot of the nutrients, which is what your roots like. So that is, the general rules are that brassicas will always follow legumes because they've enriched the soil with nitrogen. Potatoes and brassicas are both depleters of soil. They both like a lot of nutrients, and they need a lot of nutrients, but you don't put them together because they like different pH levels. So they don't like the same pH. One likes a more acidic soil and one likes a more alkaline soil. So you can't put them together. That's why they have to stay separately grouped. And also just remember that rich soil and roots don't mix, because the roots need the poor soil to have to go down to find their nutrients. So we'll share a diagram about that, because it can sound a little bit confusing about what goes where. But once you draw out your plan and you just then move things around, you'll start to get the picture of how things will follow, and why each group follows itself, or the next thing, what the benefits of it are. So that's the basic idea of the 4-year crop rotation. There are a few things that also need to be considered. If you're growing perennial veg, which are vegetables that come back year after year, like rhubarb, what we've gotten here are mostly annuals, which need to be planted every year, and then they'll go to seed, and we'll plant seed again the following year to grow them again. We've got a few perennials, which are the ones that come back every year. Our strawberries are perennials. Our rosemary is a perennial, but everything else is an annual. So if you've got anything like rhubarb, or herbs that are going to be coming back year after year, you need to find them a forever home. So you need to find a spot in your garden that they can stay in forever. Things like squash and courgettes, there are a few, and sweet corn, there are a few plants that, and lettuces, they can kind of be fill in the gaps, so they don't fit to the 4-year rotation plan. If you've got spaces, you can put them in, but just to mind maybe that you don't grow them in the same place every year, move them about a little bit, but they don't have to follow the 4-year rotation that the 4 main family groups do. It can be a little bit confusing when you're trying to explain crop rotation, so it does help sometimes just to draw it out. So here we've got our 4 beds for the 4 years, and we've got our 4 veg groups. We've got potatoes, legumes, brassicas and roots. So in the first year we're going to put our potatoes in there. Our legumes are going to follow the potatoes, so they'll go 1 back. Our brassicas are going to follow the legumes, so they'll go 1 back from that. And our roots are going to follow the brassicas, so they'll go 1 back from that. So that's our layout for the first year. Going into the second year, we're just very simply going to move everything on 1. So we've got our potatoes, legumes, brassicas, roots. Okay. So our potatoes are going to go in where the roots were, and this, at this point, this is a bed that you will need to feed up. So you're going to want to add organic matter to it after the roots. So when you've harvested your roots at the end of the season, you will add a good mulch to that bed. You can add seaweed, you can add some well rotted down manure, or you can grow a green manure just to return the nutrients there, because the roots will have used it up and your potatoes are a hungry crop, so they're going to want a good nutrient value in there. So in the second year, your roots will then move on to the brassicas, where the brassicas were. The brassicas will have depleted that soil, which is what the roots like. The brassicas will move on to where the legumes were. The legumes will have fixed nitrogen in there, which is what the brassicas like. And your legumes are going to move in where the potatoes were. Potatoes will have depleted that soil, and the legumes will do their nitrogen fixing to increase the fertility of that. So you can see it sounds complicated, but it is fairly simple. And it's for anybody who's growing veg and wants to get as much produce as possible. This is definitely something that needs to be kept in mind.